Okay, before I do like the official intro, let's be honest. Who here just wants to thank Thomas from OpenAI for ChatGPT? Come on. Come on. But we also have somebody from EMEC, and it's thanks to their chip innovation that it's even possible. So let's thank them both. Now, I'm going to take you a little bit behind the screens, like how Shift is designed every year, how we get to the program. So every year at the brainstorm, there's always this silly idea. You know, there's always like this wild idea that sounds completely unfeasible. It's funny, but you don't really see a way that you can make it happen. A brain fart is what this is called in brainstorming science. But the fun part is that every once in a while this idea actually makes it into the program. Well, this part is that idea. So this year, the wild brain fart was an idea called Prompt Up the Panel, which was a panel about AI using AI. So in the panel that you're about to experience, AI will actually listen in to the panel and change the setting according to what is being talked about. And if you can't come up with questions afterwards, don't worry, AI can. But of course, we also need some guests that our AI model can listen to, so we have invited some guests as well. We have Steven Lattre, who is the VP R&D Machine Learning and AI at EMEC, and Thomas Degry, who is member of the design staff at OpenAI. And to plug both gentlemen into our model is our very own machine learning lead, Remy De Lange. Welcome to the stage.
All right, hi everyone, and thank you, Thomas and Steven, to join us. As you know, maybe to set the scene a little bit, last year we had a Shift conference just like this one, but I think it came a bit too early regarding generative AI. We just came out of the summer. DALL-E 2 was just released, so Twitter, now X, has I'm a bit confused by the coffee machine, but DALL-E was just out. A lot of images were generated. We didn't know yet that this would spark a whole open source community, a whole chain of other models which would do the same thing and which change the way we design for the future to come. At the same time, we had Copilot who hit the shelves, who was available for open access or for a subscriber model, and that changed the way that we are coding today now. And there are even tools like Flutterflow Gen AI, which makes software engineering in general in the future obsolete. And then we have text. Just after our conference, we got an early Christmas present from OpenAI, being ChatGPT. I don't think we have to talk about what effect that had. It was one of the quickest growing apps from our time, and as well sparked a whole industry to look at the leader OpenAI and see what the next steps will be. So basically, what I'm seeing for a team over the last year is that on the one hand, generative AI technology has moved from a more academic setting up to a product setting. And secondly, that OpenAI has been a trailblazer in this and has really led the rest of the industry as an example. And so there, I introduce Thomas and Steven as both maybe the two facets of this coin, like the industry and the research part there. And maybe, Thomas, I want to start with you. Can you maybe introduce yourself? How did you get to OpenAI and what do you do there?
Sure. Yeah, hi. I am a member of the design staff at OpenAI. What that really entails is I'm a software or designer turned software engineer. I work on all things communications for OpenAI. So think about things like OpenAI.com, the research like pieces, presenting those, blog, whatnot. I ended up there. I'm originally from Kortrijk, and moved to the States for an internship. Worked 4 years at Stripe, payment processing, and then been at OpenAI for the last year and a half. So pre-ChatGPT, right around the DALL-E 2 mark was when I joined. And yeah, it's been kind of a wild ride.
All right, thanks. Steven, could you also introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Steven Latré, responsible for AI at IMEC. Pretty broad topic, so we're a research organization, over 5,000 researchers in Belgium and the Netherlands. AI takes a really big part of that. About 400, 500 researchers really focusing on AI. So it also means that what we're doing is quite broad. It really goes to applications. But our main USP is really the combination of hardware and software. So we make novel type of chip technology to really support the AI systems of the future, such as OpenAI.
All right, thanks. I think we as in the pockets really felt the influence of Gen AI. If some people here with us as well in the talk from Bank also showed how it's transformed parts of their business. How was it to be at the center, at the epicenter of that evolution?
Yeah, I think similar for you all. I mean, we just have these tools somewhat earlier than like the people outside of the organization. It's kind of this thing that you have to learn how to adopt and like figure out how to put it into your day-to-day activities. But it's been really cool to see the progress, like between like the initial versions of ChatGPT when we were talking about GPT 3.5, which was already quite good, but then to see the improvements with a GPT-4 system and how much more powerful that gets. We were able to like access those months in advance as we are doing that final safety and fine-tuning work before we put it out in the world. But yeah, that's like the fun part. You get to like see it come to life almost from like very first early models that undergo a lot more training and kind of like aligning after that, all the way to the final one that then ships. And then, you know, all of the new features like vision, voice that we're now seeing, that multimodal model type. It's been really fun to see that come together.
That's something that you already knew at the start, when you started in the DALI era, that the multimodal was coming, that GPT 3.5 and 4 were coming?
I would have to think really hard about the timeline here, but I think like ChatGPT we like got access to, I think I want to say like September-ish, August, September. So that was a couple of months before it was released. Or October maybe, but also like nobody was expecting ChatGPT to take off the way that it did. So it was kind of, there's this running joke internally that is like low-key research preview because that's what we labeled it as, a research preview, and then people really liked it and it kind of took off.
All right. Maybe I could ask you a similar question. The GPT models, ChatGPT, has it had the same effect in academia, or does this feel like old news?
Well, so I wouldn't say really exactly old news, but to some extent it's something that we saw coming, in all honesty. I didn't expect also that it really became such a hype. I think nobody expected that. Probably they would have chosen another name for that, yes. Otherwise in terms of branding, because ChatGPT is an awful brand name, I think. But you really see that, I think already from 2018-19, I saw at really different conferences how those more bird transformer type of models, which are in essence the backbone of a generative model, how they really took off in research as well. And I really felt already back then that it's just going to take a huge tech giant to use huge lots of data and an infinite amount of compute resources to actually train such a beast, and then you'll be able to do something with it. So I don't think it's something that I would say is old news, although I think also in research we're already working on a lot of newer ideas. But that's also always a bit of the balance with what you have in research. You see things happening, I think, years earlier, but at the same time, it's also not at the stage where you can really use this at scale as what you can use right now. So it's a bit of finding that hidden gem in that big pile of stones.
Yeah. Then maybe a bit more of a naughty question. Do you think then that OpenAI was lucky in there? That a lot of possible players could have been the OpenAI?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really a matter of yeah. Everybody talks about ChatGPT. Nobody talks about BART or the other types of models. In essence, they're all pretty similar, to be honest, in that sense. So I think it's just luck, you can call it. On the other hand, just also being sure that you are the first one to really coin it.
Yeah, and I think of course as well, next to luck, to being the first, also having a good brand or like communicating that in a proper manner. I think there your role was also essential there. Can you maybe talk about how to shape the image of AI towards the big public? How is that about?
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge these days. Like, this is obviously like technology that's changing quite rapidly. It might have like really like large scale effects on society as we know it. And so like, how do you like clearly communicate like what these things are and what they can do for us today? And then also like try thinking about the like future and like making sure people are bought in and aligned there. We try to do a lot of work as far as like safety and like actually involving community there to help find or like filter out some of the, or like give input to make sure models are safe. I think like we try to be very open and like level-set with our communication, like very like factual and not too marketing-y. I think that's an interesting like struggle for us as a company. Like, we are a research lab that just happens to create a product, and so like how much do we like want to productize or like marketing pages, and like the kind of like vibe around ChatGPT is always this like struggle, as we just want people to use it as much as possible. And the productization almost came as like a way for us to like make sure it's not like the compute required behind it is so like large that like, you know, pricing and whatnot came as a way to kind of like curb demand to a certain extent, because there's just not enough compute to otherwise like give everyone unlimited GPT-4 access. Even though I think like that's really what we would love to do at this time, because there's like for us obviously benefits as well as people use it, we get more data out of it, but yeah, just like super constrained there. So there's like this continuous kind of like struggle internally between like researchers and product and like wanting to get it in as many hands as possible, and at the same time like the real is we have to be realistic with the like compute that's available.
And even now with the, I would say the partnership with Microsoft and with Azure, I can imagine that helped to bring it to more people,
Yeah.
Or is it still then putting constraints on there?
I think it's still constraining, like even at Google might probably have even like a little bit more compute. I don't know the super details there, but I think like even for them, like with BART, you see that there is some limitations to how many, or like the usage there as well. And so I think like as a world, you probably know more about this than I do, but like the compute, the amount of GPUs that are available is just at this moment constrained worldwide supply-wise.
Okay.
And I think you raise a very important point, and I think that's it's 100% the issue we have with really making this sustainable in the future. So if you look at how GPT-3 evolved from GPT-3 to GPT-4, but also GPT-1, GPT-2, because there were also predecessors to that, the amount of computation you need is actually exponentially increasing right now. So you're really blowing up the parameter size for every new version, and I think you'll have the same thing for all the different DALI and DALI 2 models, all the stable diffusion models. If you even would zoom out and you look at it from over the last decades, it's really something that we've been seeing that for the last 10 years, compute is exploding because of AI. So until 2010, so to say, so before the pure deep learning world, the amount of the size of a neural network more or less doubled every 2 years. Doubling every 2 years is not an issue. You have Moore's law, which is saying that your computer systems also double in capacity every 2 years. But then since 2010, we really see that this is growing exponentially at a factor 100 every year and still increasing in that context. So that means that the bigger state-of-the-art models, there's only those tech giants, and even those who can even those have issues, who can still really deploy such a thing. And going forward, I really have my very strong doubts whether we're going to build bigger and better intelligence with this particular idea, just because of the compute just blowing up. And that's on the one hand a technical issue, but it's also a sustainability issue. An OpenAI query or a ChatGPT query is using a factor 25 more energy than a simple Google search query. And often you get, not all the time, but you get more or less the same results. The same thing with, there's also some studies on that, and always you need to take that with a little bit of grain of salt. Also the water usage is actually increasing a lot of that. Microsoft's water usage in data centers increased 30% from 2021 to 2022, and largely part of the development of ChatGPT. So that shows how, from a sustainability perspective, but also from a technical perspective, that there's, in my opinion, a huge issue in if we are going to deploy that in the future as well. So we'll need to find something else as well to solve that.
I mean, you didn't say something else. Do you mean that the models themselves, they have to either stop growing or start shrinking? Or do you mean that hardware-wise you might find ways to, instead of blowing up the amount of computations you can do, make them more efficient, more energy neutral?
Yeah, so
the solution.
Well, actually both, and both at the same time as well. I think that's the biggest thing that we need to do. So if you look at it from a software perspective, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of generative AI, and I'm using it as well. But if you think about, is this really the path towards artificial general intelligence? What you often read in every day's newspaper, that this is the path of artificial general intelligence, and it's now going to change the world. Absolutely not convinced about that, and I'm definitely also not the only one who's saying that in the deep learning world right now. And there's multiple reasons from that from a software perspective. So one reason is that basically it's an autocomplete on steroids. So you're just predicting what the next word is based on huge corpuses of text of what you have learned in the past. So you're basically just predicting, if you say, well, generate me a book, it will really predict the next word, next word, next word, next word, next word, next word. That means that with every prediction, it makes a mistake by default, because you're making a prediction, and that prediction could be really good in 99% of the cases, but in 1% of the case, you're making that mistake. So you see that the longer the text becomes, the more you actually have a potential issue, and that actually increases exponentially. That's also what you see with the whole hallucinations thing that you have with generative AI. If you just keep on asking it's something, you will divert it into the wrong direction, and it will just fail. And that's a fundamental issue. It's not solvable with this particular software technology. If you then translate it to the hardware part, same thing there. Huh? So if you compare how our human brain works, I'm not saying that we need to build a system which is exactly like the human brain, but current systems can do similar type of operations per second, but at an energy efficiency of a factor 1 million less than what our human brain can do. And that's because we're organizing that hardware completely different. If you look at how our human brain works, we have a brain, we're computing in memory, all these type of things. If you look at how a computer works, it's completely different. You have a memory, you have a CPU, and we're constantly swapping around data from that memory to that CPU. Totally inefficient, and that's what's causing all this energy issues as well. And so that's what we're doing a lot. You need to really combine that together, hardware, software, change the algorithm, and then make sure that you also change the hardware as well.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about this autocomplete on steroids, and indeed there's the risk of hallucinations, but there might also be, and we've also seen use cases where instead of using it purely as an autocomplete, there's also ways to retrieve additional information, inject that, and create more rails around those models. Is there any solution to these problems, or do you still see this as a limitation of the technology by linking it to a knowledge base or linking it to Google or Bing, for instance?
It depends a bit on how you look at it. I think it's generative AI is really good for the things that it's good at. Being, you have a piece of text, you want to redact that text, you want to make it shorter. You have a piece of code, you want to generate new type of code, or you want to make modifications. Great stuff. I mean, I would continue doing that and using that, and I'm using it as well in my everyday life all the time for that. But then if you say, okay, I want it really to reason about things, it's extremely, extremely bad. If you ask it how much is 2,134 times another number, you'll get for sure in half of the cases a wrong answer. And if you say, are you sure, you will probably get a different answer, which is again wrong. And that's because it's simply not doing any type of reasoning. That's actually called Moravec's paradox. So it says that we're able to build with AI unbelievably advanced stuff, but it's very hard to build very simple things with AI as well. So you can generate papers with generative AI, but you cannot ask it, for example, if you have a dishwasher, for example, and if you would just say, okay, give me the steps to now empty that dishwasher. That's going to be super hard with any type of AI right now to do, while a 10-year-old is able to do that. My 10-year-old is not able to do that, but that's another that's another problem actually I have there. But at least that shows you that, yeah, we're not really there yet in what it should be.
So the limitations that are there, then maybe I'll come back to you, Thomas. I can imagine that within OpenAI, everybody's aware of these limitations. What are the steps? How deep does it go to communicate that within the organization, but also then through the apps like ChatGPT, like the APIs, like documentation? How does that work with communication there?
Yeah, I think we try to we have disclaimers at all times, and I think part of that is more and more lawyers are at OpenAI too, but this can hallucinate and whatnot. I think to your point, one thing that is an interesting approach to the reasoning is being able to eject out of the generative AI world and then be able to run Python or something like that to actually do logic or math or data analysis without it being on the generative AI model. I don't fully understand how that works necessarily, but it is a nice way to when it's hard to really go into reasoning and discussion, but for there's almost these escape holes that you can use for things that that something else is just better at. The generative AI can write the code, and then a Python executable can run it, and the generative AI model can take the output of that and present it to a user. So that's another thing. I'm sure there's going to be more and more, but to your point, things like the actual hallucinations, those are just really hard, if not impossible, to fix with the current technology that's in place.
Yeah.
I think what you're going to have is a much more modular approach. So I think generative AI, it's basically reasoning or having some kind of intelligence with language. That in essence is very powerful, but if you look at it from a more philosophical point of view, we have kids who are 1 year old who have very limited vocabulary and are still able to actually create quite a bit of intelligence as well. So just doing it only with language is not going to be the only direction, but it could be part of the solution. So you'll probably have one block which is building up intelligence with language, and you'll have more old-fashioned AI sometimes, what they call good old-fashioned AI. Blocks that are doing more reasoning on top of that, but are using generative AI as a kind of knowledge base for this. And I think that has its advantage, and we're probably going to see that more. And that's really what we're doing in research as well. I heard an interesting quote from Jan LeCun 2 months ago. He was saying, generative AI is old news, and I would suggest everyone in research to abandon it right now. I'm not saying that it's the most popular statement that he made, but there is some truth in that, and he is really looking more at modular approaches, so really combining that with more reinforcement learning stuff and other stuff as well. And that's probably going to be the future of intelligence going forward.
Okay, but then you're talking about text. I think it won't solve the full problem, but now we are also seeing those models, both open source and closed source, to go beyond text, have this multimodal aspect, both audio, text, images getting combined, both in input and outputs. Is there a better solution already than just text, or do you still feel these limitations are there?
Well, I think it's definitely not only text, it's language, and that might be something different in the sense that text is a specific instantiation of language. So we're seeing the same type of generative AI on, for example, how you were able to predict how a new molecule would actually bind to another molecule, and in that context would be a perfect way to generate new types of drugs, simply by doing generative AI. So I think that actually that has a lot of value as well. So it's really language, and the kind of vocabulary could be text, but it could be it could be a molecular language, could be an audio language, could be an image language as well. And in all these cases, it actually works. But again, fundamentally, if you really look at it if you're only going to build intelligence as having an autocomplete on steroids, that will never work.
Okay. All right. Maybe let's get a bit out of the technical part here. When we look at the last year, it started with OpenAI really taking the stage, really starting out as this giant, which seems to be unbeatable. Now, 1 year later, I would still argue OpenAI is at the top, but there are a lot of competitors who are catching up, who are searching for a way to also be there on the top. And there's also this open source community, which rivals or even exceeds in, for instance, image generation. How do you look at the position of OpenAI? Do you also feel that internally, or do you still feel this is you have this advantage that you have today?
I think we still feel quite good in general. I think like the Google and stuff, the Googles have it has taken them some time to basically get their ducks in a row, and like it's not an organization that for the last 20 years really had to sprint on many things. But they're definitely getting there now. I'm not super familiar with the open source community particularly, but at some point you start getting into like the basic research needs to be really good, but then also like the amount of data that you have, and I think like that's maybe the interesting part with the open source stuff. Like I'm not sure, even for us, like that becomes a problem. Like at some point, all of the like high quality data is like started to be used in these models to like train them, and like how do you get more, or where do you get more, then becomes the issue. So I think we're still in a quite good position, and like the researchers are like driving that like next wave of like stuff, and I think like we have a good amount of research still going on. But yeah, I'm curious if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a catch-22. So if I look at it with other technical sectors, I think the AI community is pretty open source driven, which is great. There's also in the scientific community, there's in the major conferences, you're not able to publish anything unless you really open source your code as well. So that's really great, and I see that over the last 10, 15 years, that has really driven a lot of innovation, because from a research community, someone takes one piece of code and you build on top of that. I think the same thing is for AlphaFold, for example, which is Google's attempt at doing drug design and protein folding, completely open source, really great. On the other hand, the data part is of course often not open sourced, and which I totally get as well, but that's really the fundamental part where you often need to make a difference as well, and that's really a limitation. I think if you look at it from right now, to really advance the technology in that sense. But I also totally understand that. I mean, also from a privacy perspective, you're not able to do all of that. So that's one issue. I think the other issue is a little bit what we talked about already as well, about the compute intensive part of it. You see that for these type of models, also we as a research institute, and I don't think that we have, we're just two people in the basement, we have enough infrastructure. It's really hard for us to really make, from an algorithmic point of view and from an end-to-end system point of view, to really make any type of advancement in that field. And I think the same holds for any type of university in worldwide, even the bigger ones. It's a tech giants who can still advance that state of the art because of the computational issue. So whether it's an open source or closed source, to some extent it doesn't matter, because it's really about, do you have like 5,000 GPUs who can, and do you have the budget to run them for a half year? Yes or no?
But what is then the effect of for instance, OpenAI who decides to start closing on those learnings and advancements and starts, what effect does that have then on the research community? You feel, because they are in that position, that they should open source that, or?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, they're doing it, so I don't think that's a big issue. But just because of the technology itself, open sourcing enough is not enough. It's just an issue of having deep pockets to really build this type of thing. So yeah, I also understand they're not going to say, hey, if you want to train a model, we'll give you 5,000 GPUs and have fun. That's never gonna happen. So I think in terms of democratization of this technology, it's at this moment in time a situation, especially also for research, where only 2, 3, at most 4 players can really do this in the entire world. I think that's an issue from a research perspective, but that's equally an issue from a business perspective as well. You see that a whole new economy is starting, a whole new list of startups. So before the generative AI, or before the ChatGPT part, the biggest growing AI company in the world in 2022 was Jasper, a marketing company, which are already using prompts as well, so using GPT behind the scene, not ChatGPT then. But what happens if one of those technology players suddenly decides, okay, I'm going to shut down this API, or I'm going to, because their costs are increasing as well, I'm going to double the cost of any type of query. It has a ripple effect, a domino effect across all those startups that are building stuff with generative AI right now.
Then what do you think are the niches currently within research as well as within business which can be exploited, which are still accessible without having 5,000 GPUs at your disposal?
Yeah. So on the one hand, what I already talked about a little bit on and new types of machine learning, specifically on new types of relationships that you get out of it, causal things, so learning causal relationships out of data. These are things that are happening. But there's also, and we should not forget about that, generative AI is great, but there's, until 2 years ago, everybody was also talking about AI and was doing a great amount of stuff with it already, and that's still accessible today as well. So anything that looks more at edge AI, so really doing AI close on a sensor, is still something that we can do, and is, for me at least, probably arguably even more important than the whole generative AI hype we have right now. If you look at for example, the Apple Vision Pro, who wants to do some kind of AR, VR stuff, and you want to process of what is happening, that's not generative AI, and it's never going to be generative AI. It's a simple computer vision model. It's not super simple, but it's a computer vision model which works quite well, and anyone can improve. If you look at automotive self-driving cars of the future, same thing there as well. You can put AI very, very close to the sensor. There's still an issue of energy efficiency, and I think we as IMEC can also help solving that. But these are all type of applications that you can easily do as well. So let's not make the mistake. Happy that there's so many people for generative AI here, but let's not make the mistake to limit AI and the potential of AI only to that generative AI movement. Only because we just had this breakthrough this year, which has been kind of an iPhone moment for AI and mass adoption of it. There's all these different types of technology that are still relevant as well.
Makes sense. That's then when you are not a tech giant, or when we try to find the lessons that we learn from not being that. But I mean, before the tech giants, I'm not sure if it's just your opinion or bigger than that. But looking forward, what do you feel are then those advancements that given your place in the market, you can do? How can you keep leading in there?
I think a big thing is going to be cost and availability. To Steven's point, like if there are like improvements that can be made as far as like, and they're not going to be huge to start, but with every improvement that can be made as far as like efficiency for like these queries, it allows us to like open it up more broadly. And I think like another concern that we like hear a lot is that GPT-4 is quite great as far as like knowledge and like reasoning to a certain extent, but that it's quite slow. And so like that's another thing that like I think there's a lot of room for improvement in for us. And then like I think you know, the like various vision / voice and like being able to output and read images is also like, that's already here, but I think like that keeps getting better and better. But I think the big thing is going to be efficiency for us, so we can like just roll this out more broadly. And then, you know, I think another big thing that we're seeing right now is like big enterprises like just signing like tens of thousands of licenses for their like businesses and for everyone in a company like a McKinsey or something to use, and like that's just a lot of people and a lot of queries, and so like any efficiency there is going to be huge.
Right. Okay, we looked at the past, we looked at where we are at right now, what the opportunities are. Maybe let's do something dangerous and make some predictions, as our models do. What do you think we will learn? What did we learn from the last year, even though it will not be in generative AI, or it will be? But what can we learn going further in AI, in machine learning, in the way that we work with data? What will be the next thing in 5 to 10 years from an academic perspective?
Indeed, I don't have a crystal ball, always hard to say. So I think a number of things. I think to begin with, I think you're definitely going to see that generative AI part still continuing to blossom. So I think that will be one branch of it, and you'll see a lot more practical applications for that in terms of productivity. Probably a prompt engineer is going to be a craft that is going to be extremely important for the next decades in the economy. So that's one thing. I do think that you're also going to see a lot more really practical applications. I think we're really at the level where, well, it's really gotten out of the basement, AI. It was always really fluffy. Okay, what can I really do with it? Is it intelligence or not? I think it's going to be clear that as a product company, you'll be able to really easily use this and also bring this as a solution to your customers as well. I always say that it's a bit of it's a bit like the internet. So in the 90s, I grew up in the 90s, and then you really need to be a computer nerd to really make a great website, and you needed to have a computer nerd like me to make websites. In the last 10, 20 years, what we've seen is that all these CMSs have made it just drag and drop and click and you're ready. You'll for sure have the same thing with AI now as well, and generative AI is, I think, of ChatGPT specifically is a perfect example for this. You can easily type something in and that's it. So I think in the future you'll have the same thing where people are starting to use this technology and you can really build products out of it. And if you look at it from a research perspective, so I think I already hinted a little bit at that. So I don't believe that generative AI is the only answer. I think we'll need to have a much more modular approach where generative AI is one thing and you need to combine it with reinforcement learning stuff that we talked about like 3-4 years ago. That was the big hype back then. Then we probably had a big room only with people interested in reinforcement learning. Nobody is talking that much anymore about that, but that will come back. More reasoning type of things which are even more older, 20, 30 years old, they will come back as well, and we'll start building that toolbox of different things. But in order to do that, we need to get that compute part down. So you see quite a lot of startups right now as well, really focusing on AI hardware, making sure that we can still sustain it in the future as well. Because I think that's the biggest worry. Everybody talks about AI right now, but people tend to forget that we've had AI winters in the past as well. So there were previous moments in time where you definitely also had rooms full of people only looking at AI, and then you have literally a decade where it would be completely nobody at all. I still remember very much when I was still a PhD student, the very first conference I went to, I proposed a machine learning model, and in the whole room I only had one person who stood up and who said, "Machine learning, nobody believes in it, so why are you doing this?" So I think it would be completely different right now. But don't forget, this can come back as well, if that sustainability and that computer efficiency, energy efficiency is not solved. So that's a hurdle that we need to take, or I think we're going to end up with an AI winter again. So that's equally possible.
But then to make it very concrete, are we today in an AI spring, an AI summer, an AI autumn?
We're for sure at the top of that hype curve. That's I think really, really clear. So I think it could go down for sure.
All right. And then maybe to finish before we go to some questions, let me pitch you against each other. The next big leap then, maybe it will be in the next months or when we are back in spring or summer. The next big leap in AI, will it come from academia? Will it come from industry?
Well, I think the thing with academia is that we're really looking at like the things that they're working on right now is like what we're going to see in like 2, 3, 4 years. So I think I would say from products right now. I think a big thing that we're like also haven't really touched on, and like we're OpenAI, is there's a lot of room for improvement, but like everyone expects different things from their AI as well. And I think like right now there's only one solution and it fits all. And I think like personalization and customization is, I think, like going to be another thing that like more and more companies try to look into. Multiple personalities or whatnot, or like in the US, what you see is that a lot of the like more conservative people are upset with how like AI models are like fine-tuned right now, and so like I'm sure that that is something that we're going to see a lot of movement in over the next few months, as well as like they try and like make something that maybe is a little bit more tailored towards certain whether it's use cases or parts of the population. So I would say that that's maybe a thing that we haven't really touched on as much yet.
Yeah, I'm a bit skeptic there. It sounds a bit as well like the recommender systems and the bubbles or echo bubbles, echo chambers, which you might have with recommender systems on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to mitigate that? If you go for the personalization and say, hey, let's have a more conservative, a more liberal version of these models?
I think the really hard thing is like keeping it between lines that everyone agrees on, and what are those lines is like also the really hard part, and there's no clear answer there. I think like as far as like regulation and whatnot goes, there's just, in the US they're finally starting, Europe has like the AI Act now, but I think
Almost, yeah.
almost. But we're very much in infancy there, and I think like that's the hard part as we like start looking into like customization, or like that's something you start to consider. At what point do you say like this is not acceptable anymore, or this is too far, or this is harmful, and like that's a vague line. And just like a lot of the social media like echo bubble-y type stuff, like who gets to make that decision? Is it like the Facebook who gets to self-regulate? Is it Europe? Or like I think there's a lot of like unclarity, or not like, yeah, lack of clarity there.
And who is deciding that right now?
I think at the moment it's the companies themselves. I think like in the US, I think there's some rumors of Biden also working on something right now, but yeah. And then the hard part becomes like, you know, we have that with social media too, but like the rules in one country or continent aren't the same as in another, and so like, do you then like go separate approaches or try and like one size fits all?
I think that's gonna, I mean, we didn't touch upon that right now until now, but I think that's a very important point as well. So I think from a geopolitical point of view, we really see three different directions at this moment in time. So you have on the one hand, US, which is really company-based, and regulation is being done mainly there, and that also allows the technology to really blossom. Europe, or let me first go to China. Maybe China, I think, is much more state-oriented, but even less issues. And I say that with big quotes in terms of data privacy. You can just put all data together, and it's much more efficient. And we're hearing not a lot about China right now, but I can guarantee you, if I see also the dominance of China at machine learning conferences, there is probably much more state-of-the-art technology there than there is in the US right now. We're just not seeing it. And then Europe is very, very clearly very late in the game, but is choosing for a kind of more regulated, more ethical approach. If I'm an optimist, I'm saying that's the right way. If I'm a pessimist, I'm saying that's the only thing they can still do. It's probably somewhere in the middle of this. But you'll see different types of versions of this also in different types of countries. And we should also not forget that if you are visiting a country like that behind the scenes, there could be a lot of these models as well. Not everyone has a GDPR regulation and an AI Act coming there as well.
And so, going back to the original question, do you think that in this European late to the game, more strict environment, is there a place for EMAC or European research to give that next leap in AI? Or do you think we do have that disadvantage today?
Yeah, so I think it depends a little bit on how you look at it. So the question on industry versus academia, I think that question is becoming less and less relevant, in the sense that the lines between industry and academia, especially in AI, are blurring. DeepMind is much more a university group than if I compare with other types of research organizations, including ours. I think they're doing much more fundamental research on some aspects than we are, and we're closer in terms of product. Do we have an area to play? yes, otherwise I would probably not get up at in the morning. And it's for me really at the heart of software co-design. So not everybody knows this, and my apologies for the 30 seconds shameless advertising for IMEC, but IMEC is really worldwide unique in terms of chip technology. All the big technology players, including these guys here, are coming to Leuven, to our clean room, specifically to work on new type of chip technology. And to solve all of that, I think we have a perfect play to do this in Europe. The EU Chips Act is also extremely important for that. So my answer is double. On the one hand, no, we have literally no play anymore in any type of software generative AI at the level of what OpenAI is doing. But yes, if it comes down to making sure that we've solved these fundamental issues to really make it deployable on hardware, honestly, I think here in Europe, we're much more suited than in the US for that.
Okay, and why is that then?
Because we had a unique technology, so because it's really, you need completely different types of chips to build this, and the only place in the world where everybody comes is really in Leuven, in these clean rooms to start building those chips right now, but it will not come out, you will not see those AI chips in Coolblue next year. That's the only issue. It will take you years and years before we get that disruption.
All right. I really enjoyed the conversation. Maybe I want to turn to all of you. Maybe I was too soft. Maybe I didn't ask the right questions, so now it's your turn. Are there any questions you would like to ask Thomas or Steven?
You mentioned that AI is pretty bad at reasoning. This is how I understood you. But if you try like a little bit better prompting, you can get it to reason pretty well. You can say like, let's think step by step, and this alone helps a lot. And then you get the better results. Then how do you then explain the fact that AI does pretty well? Sure, the GPT-4 version does very good at a lot of tests that are made for humans, and it scores like top 90% of humans.
Yeah, so first of all, I said generative AI is bad at reasoning because there are a lot of AI tools which are extremely good at reasoning as well. I think that the answer is very simple. If you give it the entire internet, there's a pretty good chance that that test has already been asked, or that question or a similar type of question has already been asked in the past as well. So it's pretty good at predicting what the next output is. But it's by far, and it's just, if you look at it, it's not reasoning at all. It is not reasoning. I cannot say that more than it is. It is really just, I have a bunch of text, a string of text, I'll just predict the next words of what it is. And I know that's, I'm oversimplifying things to some extent, but that's not enough. And in 95% of the cases that will probably work, but in a lot of cases it will not work either.
A really good example of like how like simple things it's quite bad at compared to humans, like things like Wordle, which is like the word game, or like creating anagrams. It's really bad at that. Like it can't like if it has to like use context from around it and then like come up with answers based on that, it's just not good at it. Which is really funny because even Wordle is like the thing where you like have to, for people who don't know, it's like the New York Times game now, where you like have like 5 or 6 guesses to like guess a word. It's extremely bad at it, and you would think because like it's the language at the end of the day it'd be pretty good at it, but there's logic involved and it just can't.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Sitting next to you, Freddy, on your side.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you have a view on how to create economical value or business value with generative AI, because it looks like still a toy where people maybe have some limited benefits, but I see this as a big challenge, as a big danger for the hype cycle, that when it doesn't land into economical value, that it will again be in the small hands, I would say. So how do you see, what kind of business value or economical value do you see with Gen AI?
Another question for you.
Yeah.
Well, you're both in the game, so maybe what you see in US or in Europe happening, that I'm going to specify my question a little bit more even. I was 2 days ago at another conference, and there they claimed, okay, if you're just a normal company, don't embark on it because it's extremely expensive and it's going to give you value only in 3 to 5 years. So we have not the big tech companies here in the room. So if you're a normal company, normal business, we're all excited about what could happen, but I'm still very skeptical about what we can do really with it.
I can maybe speak a little bit to what we're seeing in the States. I think I mean, this is being transcribed with Whisper, I believe, but like you see it being used in hospitals where like doctors use it to like keep notes during their visits, and so like there's a lot less like note-taking and administrative work that needs to be done, and at a quite reasonable price. So like I think like it's already adding economic values there, and in a way that I think like is not very heavy to implement, and like is quite easy to implement at a pretty low cost. So like seeing those type of things, and then if you're like a call center or something like that, like if you use GPT-4 APIs, I think like or being able to like create like very like well searchable knowledge bases for internal like company information, I think like is all quite easy to do at the moment, and is like, I would argue, I don't have percentages on that, but could like make a meaningful difference for like employees or like who are like trying to find an answer real quick on a phone call. But I would argue that there is already like economic like value to be derived quite easily.
Yeah, so you stole my thunder, but I so 100% agree with it, in the sense that I think what OpenAI and the others did as well is they turned AI into an API, and I think that's extremely important, that you can just do a simple query on this, and so it is a productivity and efficiency saver because of that. As a hobby, I am part of an organization, and we already switched to ChatGPT for all our emails. We get at a certain moment in time 5,000 emails in a day, and all of these are already generated by ChatGPT to just answer, and just click. We still do a verification, and that's it. So I think it's in a lot of cases it really helps. But indeed, I think it also really depends on your particular product, and for this, if you need to turn it really into the heart of your own product, I would not always say you need to 100% embrace generative AI, because it's really, use it for the things it's good at.
And maybe I'm not in the panel, but if I can chip in. I think it's also a question of AI has never been more accessible, but as an organization, you should ask the question, is this an AI application which I should build, because I will have a competitive advantage by doing that, and if I don't, well then I'm screwed? Or is it a tool which someone else has built, like the API, like a product as a Jasper, for instance, was already building that before? And what do I choose between those? And I think building one yourself can be very expensive. Buying an off-the-shelf tool, never been more accessible. We for sure have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
I recently read that some design expert from Apple might be joining OpenAI. I just looked up the name, Johnny Ive, cheated a bit. But what can be the implication of someone like that joining the company?
I don't have the details there. I think we were talking earlier, this is kind of like an iPhone-ish moment almost, so like I think there is also like this question of like right now a lot of the AI stuff is like digital, and like we're dealing with digital like websites or APIs or stuff like that, but like what applications does it have in the physical world? I think it's like starting to be explored right now. There's like a couple of like smaller companies in San Francisco that I know of that are like, and there was this like fashion show recently with this like clip AI thing. There's definitely a lot of questions as to like recording and like what is privacy and consent and all of those things there. But yeah, the Johnny Ive thing, I heard the rumor is all I can say about it.
Would you like to work with Johnny Ive?
It'd be interesting, right?
That's not an answer, but I'm seeing some other.
Yes, Bill Gates recently declared that GPT-5 will probably plateaued by some type of things. So it would, Stephen, kind of reinforce what you said about, okay, auto-regressive LLM are probably going to get some kind of limits, and we will see new kind of architecture. You, Thomas, how do you see that? Can you tell us something about what to expect about the next generation of GPT models? Also, GPT Vision was just launched.
Yeah, not much I can comment on there. I also don't have like a ton of insight as to like what the research is there. It takes a while to like train a new model, and then it also becomes a question of like what constitutes a new model, or like at what point you call something GPT-5. I think like even all of that is up for interpretation. So yeah, that's all I can say about that.
I can maybe make a guess. So I think multimodality is absolutely one part of it. So combining even more text, image, video, and so on. On the other hand, also relations. So can you really, and you see it already in research a little bit, can you really accurately describe whether a person is wearing a hat or a hat is wearing a person? Might seem very simple for us, but it's unbelievably hard for AI to do right now as well. And these type of relationships is something that you would need to, that is where we're really seeing advancements right now.
All right, then maybe one final question. Maybe let's go to the back to not have a bias to the front. Questions? Mic is going. Mic is there.
Hey, thanks guys. So I'm gonna combine two questions into one. So first thing is how this, let's say the intelligence stuff is gonna fit within the embedded systems that they have a limited resources, let's say. So I'm talking about the cars or whatever can be used there. And also the second question, I'm gonna go back to what I learned in school. Let's say we have 4 types of of the artificial intelligence. Let's say it's either can have the same capabilities of the human brain, so do as like a human can do, or think like a human being, or act as a human being, or act, let's say, reasonably. So for the generative artificial intelligence, I see that it doesn't fit in any of those. So I'm just question to you, Stephen, how about the 4 types that I just talked about? Are they eclipsed by the generative artificial intelligence? And do they have any feature compared to generative artificial intelligence? Thanks a lot.
I'll maybe talk first about the embedded part. So I think it's still a long shot to say tomorrow that we're gonna put generative AI into really embedded models. That's an issue we're already seeing right now as well. If you, for example, would just ask any type of digital assistant on your phone, I'm not going to mention the name or plenty of phones pop up here, but if you would ask, hey, could you, for example, turn off the lights? What you have right now is that already that machine learning model itself is, because it's natural language processing, it's pretty energy intensive. So it's being sent out to the cloud, to a data center, goes back. That entire system actually takes more energy than turning that light on for 1 single hour. So it's just to show that also at the edge, it's already an issue. So you'll see smaller models. There's a whole tiny ML movement at this moment in time, where we're very much looking at as well. Again, all these things of hardware, software, co-design where I talked about. The automotive part is a little bit different in the context that you're actually we're building an HPC on wheels there. So the amount of compute power we have is, especially for inference, because you're never going to do training in a car, is still pretty okay, but also there it gives quite a bit of issues. Just to throw again a number at you there, if you would do urban driving with a self-driving car, 1/3 of the entire energy budget goes to the AI at this moment in time. So it's huge. We need to get that down as well. There are some ideas on this. We're heavily working on this as well with our partners. Second question, so no, I think these technologies will definitely not get eclipsed by generative AI. I think a lot of these technologies actually they failed for me because they, for example, if you look at formal reasoning algorithms, they failed because you didn't have a good knowledge base of working on this. So for those of you who are familiar with AI, there have been some technologies in the past where we really from a mathematical perspective said, okay, we're gonna build AI by really building up a thought process ourselves. But then you only were able to do this, although the mathematical formulas were there, you were only able to do this if you were able to put the entire knowledge of the world into the database. Actually, with generative AI, you can have a bit of that to some extent. So I think a combination of that is probably going to be an interesting part going forward.
All right, then I would say first and foremost, thank you for joining the session. But I should say, wait.
Maybe one more question, not by me. So we promised that AI was listening in the whole time. You probably noticed the visuals changing based on what our guests were discussing.
Talk too much about chips, apparently. So
Yeah, I wonder why. I say.
What shortage?
So, let's break some fourth wall now. How about instead of us asking questions about AI, let's have AI ask questions about itself. Let's listen to a question that AI generated based on the panel discussion just now, Ian.
Yes. So AI has been listening the whole time. It's a bit dreamy apparently, because it's asking you guys, what is the #1 technology that you would wish to see generative AI could do in the near future?
Making sure my kids clean up their mess. That would really be awesome, to be honest.
I'm gonna go with a professional thing. It's really bad at doing very fun, creative coding and like putting visual or a visual concept into words is very hard. And so like that is a wall that I hit every single time. If it could get some improvement there, that would be very fun. Where you can like explain shaders or something and can actually write code that's useful. It just goes off the deep end right now.
All right. Thank you very much for joining. Thanks, Thomas and Steven, for being on this panel. Let's give them a well-deserved applause. And enjoy the rest of the evening. Thanks.